let's start here. Let's start with leaders say they want honesty. We all do. But in reality, I think we all know, if we're honest with ourselves, that still silence exists everywhere in our organization. So why is that? Why does that happen?
Well, so silence is seemingly safer. It doesn't take vulnerability. It doesn't take risk. And as well, there can be the bystander effect of, well, someone else is going to say it. The larger a team, the larger an organization, there's more. The sort of chasm to cross becomes higher because you think, well, someone else is going to say it. And while silence might seem safer in the short term, it can be quite costly to culture, to performance, to safety, whether psychological or physical. And as a friend of mine, Tim McClure, likes to say that the biggest concern for any organization is when their most passionate people become silent. Silence is a choice, or sometimes we might speak up but like filter what we say. I'm not lying. I'm not just sharing the most truthiest truth there might be. And so the real question for me is, how do we become aware of this, and how do leaders set the tone, set the culture, create that pickle jar? I like to talk about culture as pickle jar, that the brine determines the pickles that we become, the behaviors that we choose. So how do we cultivate cultures where we choose candor with care as opposed to passivity, or a culture of nice, or filtering, or just zipping it and saying silent altogether?
I suppose with that in mind, Shed, as leaders, none of us intentionally set out to create a negative environment or a bad environment. But so this unintentionality that happens, I think often as leaders, we're busy, we have other priorities. So what are leaders doing kind of with that unintentionality that teaches people that it's safer to stay quiet, I suppose? What are they missing?
Yeah, I think most leaders, there's an unintentionality. I will say that I have experienced some leaders where there is an intentionality, quite frankly. There is a diminishing, there is a fear based. Most of those leaders, in my experience, are drivers and not leaders, to take a term from my friend Rich Davini. As well, I would call them insecure in role. Meaning, like, it is very challenging, near impossible, to follow an insecure leader, and an insecure leader is a destructive leader. So I just want to call out that, like, there are some leaders who kind of intentionally silence, out of compliance, out of mandate, out of fear, because that's what they've been taught or learned, that that's how I lead, or that's how I do it, and it's destructive. So there is, that. I do think, though, that most leaders do mean well, but yet are unaware that they're getting in their way, and there is this unintentionality of silence. And sometimes it can look like, I want your opinion, just not that opinion. I want to hear the truth. Oh, but you always complain. And one of the things that I've been reminding leaders, especially recently, is if there are naysayers, wouldn't you rather them naysay in front of your face than behind your back? Because they're still going to naysay, right? Now, if people aren't naysaying, there's a way in which we can meet them where they're at and try to point them in a more positive direction, but we still need to meet them where they're at. So I think sometimes there is an unintentionality, because I want your opinion, I just want it to be an opinion that I like. And that's not part of the game. If you truly wish to have a speak up culture, you have to be willing to hear dissent, disagreement, debate.
And that is uncomfortable, isn't it? Often, because as you said, we've kind of been taught to, as leaders, or the pressure is on leaders to be seen to know the answer and lead the direction historically. And that's uncomfortable if you've been taught that, to then, of course, traverse and change to the idea that maybe you don't know the answer, and that you get it wrong, of course.
Yeah, and it's vulnerable to say, openly disagree with me, but it takes the most secure and confident of leaders to say, I'm not this. If a leader is the smartest in the room, you've done a really bad job of recruiting and hiring and promoting. The best leaders that I know go, hey, I'm in this seat. I strive to do as well as I can, but my job is conductor. It's to bring the best out of people. And if everyone's just nodding their head and agreeing with me, chances are we're doing something wrong, or we're missing the potential point of view, the cognitive diversity that I know Blend is all about, which I love. Silence and agreement all the time is dangerous, and a sign that you don't have a speak up culture.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose thinking then, and personally as leaders, often we probably don't realize the signals that we're sending. So, is that a blind spot? How do you make people aware of that blind spot, and what should we be thinking about as the leaders watching and listening to this today?
Yeah, mirrors. So I've actually done training where I've seen facilitators, and like there's one program I'm thinking of that I do a session in every single year. It's actually for the San Francisco Police Department that I'll be doing again in May, and they literally have a mirror for both civilians who work for the department as well as sworn in officers. But they literally have a physical mirror that they can put up so that if your body language or your face is saying something, there's an awareness of it. And so I think we can literally and figuratively build in mirrors. Mirrors can be actual mirrors.
Yeah.
That can be a bit awkward. But mirrors can be what are the sort of self-managed tools as well as the external and objective tools, coaching, journaling, feedback from peers, 360 reviews. What are the mirrors that we're building in so that we're actually getting feedback? Because there's always going to be a delta between how we think we're perceived and how we're actually experienced and perceived.
That must be pretty brutal, actually, as leaders to just literally stand there with a mirror. But I love the I love the I suppose the in your face nature of that, literally, which is good. I suppose what goes hand in hand then with that is yes, realizing perhaps that there's a gap. But I suppose often people don't talk about the cost that sits behind this, because it's seen to be sometimes soft or a kind of an intangible thing to think about. But let's make it real for people listening today. I suppose what does silence actually cost an organization? What are the impacts? What are the costs that are associated with not creating a better environment?
So, yes, I mean, there are so many real costs. I mean, first and foremost, I'll go to the definition. So, when I talk about a speak up culture, it's an environment in which people feel that it's both psychologically safe and worth it to share ideas, whether they're their best ideas or half baked ideas that get yes anded and iterated and innovated upon. We can share feedback. Feedback is dialogue. Feedback is designed to feed, to grow relationships, to grow performance, right? We can share concerns, the proverbial smoke before it becomes fire. We can disagree. The true test of a speak up culture is in the quality of our debates, dissent, and disagreement. And we can admit mistake. Sometimes there might still be consequences in admitting mistake, but we know it will lead not to being ignored or being punished. It'll lead to improvement. And so if you don't have a speak up culture, you lose on ideas, feedback, concerns, disagreements, and mistakes. There also are real sort of hard metrics here, and I'm not good at memorizing metrics, so I'm going to read these. So growth and innovation, 70% more likely to capture new markets, 45% more likely to increase market share. There's real hard costs as well as real human psychological costs in how we show up or if we choose to show up at all.
Wow, that's 70%. That's pretty scary. I think I think one of the things that also I think that sticks out to me there from what you said, Shed, is that friction that exists then between leaders and staff members in that sometimes I've heard leaders say, "Oh, well, my team aren't that outwardly. They don't really share, or across the business, people don't really share with me," as if it's a problem with perhaps them, not me. So if silence exists, how much of that is with the leadership, and how much is that in the organization? I thought that was perhaps an interesting that you mentioned there.
Yeah. Well, so one of the things I'm going to harp against open office door policies. Not that they're bad or wrong, they're just incomplete. So an open office door policy assumes that people feel that it's safe and worth it to actually walk in and share. So the number of times I've heard leaders go, I have an open door policy, but nobody comes in and no one shares. And I'm like, well, because it's incomplete, it's not enough, right?
Yeah.
So the question is, what's the responsibility on leaders? It's at least, this is improper math, Steve, but this is sort of as a metaphor. It's at least 51% on the side of leaders. It's not 99, but it's at least 51. And what that means is that as a formal leader, you have disproportionate influence than others who have less formal authority, typically, though there are sort of lowercase l leaders who have very little or no formal authority, but they have influence, right? And we choose to follow them. But yeah, it's at least 51%. When it comes to those open office door policies, sometimes your office door should be closed. Sometimes you should be having a closed door meeting. That's appropriate. Sometimes you should be doing something called work, where you focus, right? And we know these are old stats, and I'm sure that there's newer and even more concerning stats, but it takes us typically around 20 minutes to get into deep thinking, deep thought, deep work. And on average, we're distracted every 7 minutes, right? And I bet you it's even higher now with the incessant notifications that we have. So we literally have a system that makes it impossible for us to get into deep work, right? So sometimes our office door should be closed. As well, we should actively roam the halls, not just passively open our office door. And in remote and hybrid working environments, where did all the office doors go anyway? So it's at least 51% on the side of leaders, and having an open door policy is not enough. It's incomplete.
Yeah, I think that's that bridge, isn't it, from unintentionality to intentionality. I was chatting to a member a couple of weeks ago, and he was saying, actually, now I've set this focus on myself. I go into the office half an hour early every day, and that half an hour is me walking the hall, talking to people. He said it can be about anything. He just wants to make a human connection with people because it allows them to then come back and talk to him about something else during the day. And I just thought it was such a practical step of like, actually just walking around and making those physical human connections with people when he's in the office gives them the opportunity to come back, to show that door open type thing, which really resonated with me. Let's come to a question. Andrew, lovely to see you. Andrew Chung, Blend member. So quick question. We often have to work with leaders that we have. So, Shed, do you have any practical tips for proven strategies for C-suite members to work with low confidence leaders to first acknowledge the importance of this and then work on their own vulnerability and building confidence to be open to change this, fostering the risk, of creating that speak up culture?
Yeah. So I think what I'm hearing the question is, Steve, here from Andrew, is this is great and all, but how do I deal with a leader who doesn't do this? You right on, Andrew, that the only behavior and person and reaction that we can control and influence completely all the time is ourself. So focus on self. What's the type of leader you wish to be? How can you be that leader for your people? But it is hard. Leader shit rolls down the hill. So that's hard. That's a real hard challenge. A couple of ideas. One is, how can you build deeper relationship with that leader and empathy to understand why they might be behaving in the way that they're behaving? And in doing so, you might be able to build a strong relationship that you can provide some feedback if it's safe and worth it. The other is practicing what I call the not so fine art, or maybe it is a fine art. No, it is practicing the fine art of what I call Jedi leadership. So for any Star Wars fans out there, if you recall in the first Star Wars, which is episode 4 for all the geeks out there, there's Obi-Wan Kenobi who drives into town with Luke Skywalker, and they reach a stormtrooper who says, "You cannot pass here," to which Obi-Wan Kenobi uses the Force and says, "You will let us pass. We will let you pass," right? And so sometimes with these insecure, sometimes driver, be brief, be gone type of leaders, how can you make your ideas their ideas? You have to sacrifice your own ego. You have to sacrifice your own credit at times. But that's one of the ways in which you can sort of deductively, logic-wise, make your view part of their view, and even make it think that it's their idea. It's one of the challenges. It's hard work. I don't recommend you necessarily do that forever, but those are some strategies. Build relationship, build empathy, and strive to make your ideas their ideas, and know that the tail can wag the dog, that you can just lead in the way that you wish to, and the right people will follow.
That wagging the dog mentality is also interesting. We've all worked in an environment where we've, had a boss we've complained about together. So why don't we take that step to together change and impact the behaviors moving upward? It's easier to complain sometimes than it is to make it happen.
Yeah, and there is a place for complaining or venting, but it can't be the only thing we do. Then it can become toxic, right? And so, this is so frustrating. Great. What are we going to do about it? And you can say, I'm not ready to go there yet, but you need to move that conversation from venting or complaining to what is in our control, what is in our influence.
If I think about then, the exercise you mentioned earlier about showing the mirror to ourselves. So obviously there'll be lots of leaders on the session today who might go, "Oh, do I do this stuff? Am I as good at this as I could be?" What's the first move that they should be thinking about that genuinely starts to shift their behaviors and could then have an impact in starting to make that shift in their teams?
Well, I self-awareness always. I mean, there's no mistake, Steve, that every single leadership development program I've ever been a participant in, facilitated in, spoken at, heard of, audited, all the things, they all start with a module on self. And there's no mistake about that. The work of leadership is figuring out what's this instrument, where are my strengths, where are my limitations, of which we all have. That's why we need each other. How can I work to figure out what tones and keys and songs I have business playing and what tones and keys and songs I have no business playing? And then how can I work to best harmonize with others? And then the work of leadership is helping others figure out their own instrument and how to best harmonize with others. That's the sort of pass it on element of leadership as well. So it always starts with self, and gaining feedback from the people around us is so huge. The other is, how can you model the very behavior that you wish to see? So I love the story in the case of Alan Mulally when he took over at Ford Motor Company. This was 2004, and he took over from a fairly tyrannic leader who happened to be part of the Ford family, who had conditioned the leadership team as if you were sitting at a boardroom table with Dr. Evil, that if you brought any bad news, you just weren't at the next meeting. And so these sort of green, yellow, red status meetings, I mentioned this to the Blend community in Toronto last week and they loved it, were watermelon meetings. What I mean by this was everything was green on the outside but red on the inside, right? Green, 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 everything's green, because they didn't want to be the bearer of bad news because they would get in trouble. Mulally takes over. Ford Motor Company is nearly bankrupt, not performing well. In his opening press conference, he's asked, "What car do you drive?" To which Mulally says, "A Lexus, because it's the finest car on the road." A rallying cry for his team, "Make me a car I would actually want to drive," right? Yeah. And so he does what any of us would do. He has leadership team meetings, project status, where are we? How can I help? What's going on? And everything's green, 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 green. To which, after a few weeks of this charade, he says, we need to embrace more truth-telling around here. Either you're lying to yourself, your people are lying to you, or you're lying to me. I'm not sure if you've seen our balance sheet or any of our results. There's no way everything's green. Come on, team, what's the truth? I can handle it, right? And one guy, Mark Fields, who actually became Mulally's successor as CEO, raised his hand, which took a risk, which took overcoming fear, but he took the bait that Mulally was offering, even though they had been conditioned otherwise. And he said, "I got an issue over here," to which Mulally literally stood up, gave him a standing ovation, and said, "Thank you, Mark. Who can help Mark?" Someone else said, "I can help Mark." He went, "Great, let us know what you learned, report back to us." And then the next week, Mark was given an informal promotion, and his seat was moved to sit next to Mulally, as if to say, more of that, more of that, more of that. In a speak-up culture, we make it safe and worth it to speak up, especially with bad news. We encourage folks, not discourage, and reward them when they do. And I just love that case of Mulally who actually did it.
Wow, that is such a great example, and so many levers that the simplicity of putting him next to him, but in the environment of that politics is just
huge signal.
Speaks such huge volume. So I suppose for us as leaders, it's thinking about the things we say and the things we do, and being mindful of both of those, probably in equal measures. We're not a mile away from time here, folks. So if you've got any questions, probably got time for one or two very quick ones in the chat. If you would like to pop a question in the chat, feel free to do so. What I will ask then, Shed, is that, we've talked about how you start, but where do you see people running into problems? Because it's good to have the intention to go, actually, okay, let's make this environment a more psychologically safe space, a space we can speak up. But how do you sustain that? Where do people run into the problems and go, oh, this is hard, and what do they need to be mindful of?
Well, I think a few things. It's A, how can you scale this? So if it's speak up, but it's selective, or it's speak up, but only with one or two leaders, like how can you make it um, scalable and replicable? Of which is a real inherent challenge with human beings. We're not good or designed for scale. But one of the things that I will see, so I've heard CEOs and leaders of large, like I'm talking like 30,000, 300,000 person organizations say, I care about everyone who works here, which is a biological lie. You can't do that, right?
Yeah.
And we know this. We know this from our experience, and we know this from social psychology, that like we can maintain at most 200, 250 stable social relationships, and for most of us it's 150, right? And so for any leader at scale, the opportunity is to extend care, concern, safe challenge, a learning environment for the people whose names we know and careers and lives we touch every single day. But we don't do it for free. We do it so that they pass it on in their own way and in their own right. And that's the true work of leadership. I'm not so impressed if you have a high functioning, high trust, high performance ELT. Is the marketing leadership team and the ops leadership team and their teams, and now we're going N minus one, minus two, minus three, and only until the most junior folks, who often have the most interception with end users or a customer, when they feel it. So it's really around an eye for scale, but the only way to scale culture is one leader and one team at a time. That's it.
I think what's great is that we've just had a question from Andrew come in, and I think it sits quite nicely what you've just said there. He said, how do I encourage opposing views or positive challenge and take those positive actions from it without those opposing views becoming disruptive from where I want to lead the team? So how do I balance that friction? I think it's a really nice question.
Yeah, I mean, I love it because you're sort of raising the lid of vulnerability in that room. I think there's a couple things. I mean, one, I think there needs to be an openness and a willingness that where you want to lead the team may not be the only answer. I love there's a methodology that Dr. Becky Kennedy, she's the author of Good Inside and a parenting expert. She's all the rage. I love Dr. Becky. One of the things that she has is like a talking script. When someone comes at you and they bring you bad news, or they're triggered, or they're pissed off, or they're angry, whatever it might be, whether it's in one-on-one or even a group setting, I call it meet point dance. Like, meet people where they're at. You can only point them to where you wish to go if you first met them where they're at, right? And so this is Dr. Becky's script. Her script is, thank you for telling me. I'm so glad you're bringing this up, right? Which is, imagine, Steve, someone walks into your office and they're triggered and pissed, and they're coming in and they're barging, and the first thing that you say in a very disarming way is, thank you. I'm really glad that you're telling me this. And they're like, okay, they actually are feeling validated, right? Next is, I believe you. I believe you doesn't mean that you're right. I believe you simply means that you are valid to experience what you're experiencing. Right? It signals not gaslighting or toxic positivity. It means you have emotions. I sense those emotions. You're right and valid to feel those emotions. Now tell me more. And it meets people where they're at. You're allowed to validate their experience. And then once you've met them, you're frustrated. You're feeling uncertain around this. Yes, great, thank you. Can I point into some ideas of where I want to take us and why? Right? Are you ready to go there?
Yep.
And then you can dance with them to help make that change happen. So meet point dance. Thank you for telling me. I believe you. Tell me more.
Meet point dance. I'm definitely taking that one. Andrew, hopefully that answers your question. I'm conscious of time, and I'm conscious we had a couple of minutes. So if people are happy to stay for a minute or two, I'd love to perhaps wrap this up with perhaps something that gets people started. If as a leader, we've looked in the mirror a little bit today and gone, ooh, perhaps I need to do something here. If they change one thing tomorrow, obviously other than joining the course and learning from you through that, what should it be?
Well, so one is, know that I'm going to break rules and share more than one, but know that as a leader, especially as a capital L formal leader, your whisper is a shout and your tiptoes are our stomps. This is not a call for perfection, but it's a call for awareness, right? The other thing that I'll often hear is, okay, I want to do some of this stuff, but know that if you change any of your behavior, especially drastically, your people are going to think that you're an alien, right? It's like, well, I asked my people to speak up and they didn't. I'm like, how many times did you ask? Once. It's like, well, come on, you know. But when you commit to it, and then you're open to saying, hey team, I need to know the delta. Here's the ideal of where I want us to be, but I don't think we're there all the time. And so I need you to let me know and inform where's the delta. That might be in private conversations, that could be as a team, that could be move into breakouts with a meaningful conversation and come back and let's have a real conversation. But you have to know that you can't make anyone's feedback wrong. You have to say, tell me more, right? Now, if it's destructive and it's not the full consensus of the team, you might have an issue with one or two people, or they may not be part of where you want to go. But I do think there needs to be an openness to examining that gap between where you are at present and where you want to be.
I know personally, since obviously now I've known you for a while, I've tried to really bring some of these things into our team and into our leadership. And I think it's also been really helpful for me to proactively now think about the barometer of culture that I want to create. Mm-hmm. So if we're able to have those types of conversations and I'm able to create that environment with people, then now I'm proactively, when I'm bringing people into the organization, I'm looking for that ability to be able to share that openness and to be able to have that open, frank conversation, which is, so powerful. So thank you, Shed, so much. Thank you so much for giving us your time today, Shed. Absolute legend. And I think hopefully has given everyone a bit of an insight into the sorts of things that we talk about, you talk about in the Speak Up Culture book, but also in this 90-minute CPD certified course that we're going to be sharing. Building a healthy and thriving Speak Up culture is where we'd love to continue the conversation with everybody. So Blend members who are on the call, lovely to see you. Thank you for joining. You will actually have free access to this course in the Blend app. So that will be posted and shared almost straight after this conversation. For those of you who aren't yet part of the Blend community, thank you for coming and joining part of this session today. There will be a link shared in the chat, which will allow you to also come and access the course or to find out more about the Blend community and how you can join us and give yourself the opportunity to become part of this wonderful community that we have. Shed, that just leaves me to thank you again. It's always nice to spend time with you. And we'll look forward to seeing you in the course and seeing you very soon. So thanks, Shed.
Beautiful. Thanks all for joining.